Peter Greenberg's live global travel update is presented to you by Colette. Discover the world. Guided travel since 1918.
Hello, everybody. For this first Wednesday of February, Peter Greenberg coming to you from the legendary Ciragan Palace here in Istanbul. That's right, we're in Turkey. And lots of stuff to talk about. Of course, let's get right to the news, and then we'll talk about your questions and probably solve some problems. Number one, let me give you the update on the continuing investigation, which will be continuing for quite some time, on the midair collision over the Potomac. A week ago today, between the American Airlines CRJ 700, the American and the Army Blackhawk helicopter, a little bit before 9 o'clock at night, Eastern time last Wednesday. This is what the investigators know, and this is what they don't know. Here's what they do know. That the American Airlines pilots were exactly where they were supposed to be. They were doing what they were supposed to do. They were in radar contact and radio contact, and they were cleared to land on runway 33 at Washington Reagan. They were about 30 seconds away from landing, flying at about 500 feet and descending. A little bit before that time, the air traffic control guys had been in touch by radio with somebody else that was showing up on their screen, an Army Blackhawk helicopter flying in that region. And the controller alerted the Blackhawk pilot that there was traffic in the area and asked him to find it. The pilot acknowledged the traffic and said he acknowledged seeing it and was maintaining separation. And then about 8 seconds later, he flew right into the plane. And of course, we all know no one survived. And as the records are still being gathered, and in many cases lifted and pulled from the Potomac, the investigators have also learned something else, because they were able to get the black boxes from the CRJ 700 and the military version of their black box from the helicopter. All are being analyzed at the NTSB lab, which ironically is only about a mile away from the crash site. That normally doesn't happen, as you can imagine. In this case, it was ironically very convenient. They have not revealed the contents of any of those black boxes, and the cockpit voice recorder would always give you the last 30 minutes of conversation in and from those cockpits. They will be key in establishing a second-by-second timeline, along with the audio transcripts of the tower to plane communication, not to mention the radar tracks. Here's what they also know: that the helicopter was assigned to fly no higher than 200 feet. He was flying at about 375, 175 feet higher than he should have been. But then the question becomes, what was he doing in that area anyway? And was he wearing his night vision goggles, since this is a training mission? So let's back up a little bit. Helicopters transiting Reagan have been happening all along, since as long as I can remember. I couldn't believe at the time, every time I saw them, that they were either not under positive control or were in that area anyway. Who would ever want to parallel park your helicopter on a landing path to a runway? When I say park it, I mean in the sky. Well, the only immediate reaction and result from this crash so far is that the FAA has moved quickly to ban low-level helicopter flying in and around Reagan. They've made an exception, obviously, for air ambulances and emergency missions, but for anybody else, it's a no-fly area, as it should be. It's called a TCA, a Terminal Control Area. It's at every major U.S. airport, there is a TCA. It's the most restricted airspace at any airport, and it doesn't allow anybody to enter that airspace without being given permission after identifying themselves by their flight number, their aircraft, their altitude, their direction, and their speed. It allows the controllers to control them. Both the helicopter and the CRJ were in that TCA, but legally, except the helicopter may have been off course, and certainly was not at the right assigned altitude. That's all that they know. So without getting political, I can tell you what I know. This has nothing to do with DEI. Zero. Nada. The inference is that unqualified people were either flying the plane or the helicopter or in the control tower. Nothing could be further from the truth. Was there an inference there that they hired unqualified women or minorities? Guys, couldn't be further from the truth. Now, have there been hiring problems at the FAA? You bet, but it wasn't because of DEI. The FAA has done a miserable job of recruiting enough air traffic controllers to put fully staffed air traffic control centers back in operation. We're dealing with air traffic control centers right now that are operating at 85% staffing levels. That's not acceptable. It's forcing controllers to work mandatory overtime. I talked about this last week. It's the one job that nobody should be working overtime on. Now, in the last FAA reauthorization bill, Congress gave the FAA enough money to hire about 1,500 new controllers. That's good news. But they're not on the job yet. There's a 2-year steep learning curve here before they'll ever be allowed to sit, any one of them, at a control console by themselves. It's a very demanding job. So we will find out relatively quickly in this case what happened. Then comes the challenging part, and that is the NTSB, when they make their ruling as a probable cause for this accident, will also be making, I would suspect, some urgent safety recommendations. And who do they make those recommendations to? The FAA. What does the FAA do with them? That's the problem. I could spend, and I'm not exaggerating, 2 full days nonstop broadcasting to give you the accidents, the safety recommendations, and how the FAA either slow walked them or ignored them going back well over 45 years. Well over 45 years. I mean, we can even start with the DC-10 crash in Chicago back in 1979. I can prove to you that the FAA's inaction on something was a direct cause of that crash. How about that? How about, we could go the PSA crash in San Diego. I talked about that last week. The Comair crash in Lexington, Kentucky. It goes on and on and on. Now remember, no plane ever crashes for any one reason. We know that. It's a combination of reasons that in concert create a situation that you can't recover from. But the FAA, either as a pre-decision that preceded a crash, or as a safety decision to ignore recommendations after a crash, they bear responsibility here. By the way, was there only one controller working in the tower that night? Yes. Was he at fault? More than likely not, but he played a part because there should have been 2, right? More eyes would have helped. Maybe, but you can't rule that out. But that has nothing to do with DEI. That has to do with the fact that the FAA didn't have the budget or the staff or the passion or the determination to fight to hire more people. This has to be a national priority. It's as simple. So the NTSB will issue a preliminary report in about 25 days. It may give us a pretty good indication of what will finally rule for the probable cause, but we won't see a final report for at least 6 months. But then watch out after that for those safety recommendations and how long the FAA is going to take to possibly implement that. This is bad form. Now we have a new Secretary of Transportation. We now have a new acting head of the FAA. I think their work is clear that they have to do this, but we'll keep on it because this is not political. This is practical. It's commonsensical. And remember, if you know there's a problem and you investigate, and then you discover what the problem really was and what caused it, and then you can determine what the solution is, and you identify that the solution can be implemented, and decide you're not going to implement that solution, that's criminal negligence. And I accuse the FAA of that over 45 years. And I can prove it. Now, I'm not saying the FAA is not well-intentioned, but they're conflicted. They're conflicted because of a dual mandate that goes back to when they were established by an act of Congress in 1935. So we will stay on top of this story, but I did want to give you the update as to where we were in the investigation. Now, in previous incidents like this, when they get all the wreckage out and they preserve it, there is some inclination to put it on a skeleton and basically rebuild the plane so they can look at all the metal. I don't think they're going to do it this time. They did it with TWA 800 because they wanted to see if it was attacked by a missile or something from within the plane. And they needed to see that plane as fully reassembled as they could to look at the way the metal was bent, what kind of striation marks were on the inside of the metal or the outside of the metal, which would let them know right away if it was a missile or a bomb or some explosive, which they then determined what it was. In this case, they know what the missile was. It was the helicopter. So I don't think they're going to spend time reassembling the plane, but they definitely will look at the point of impact and all the other variables that contributed to that, midair collision. So we'll stay on top of that. Okay, a couple of other things that are coming up. You may have heard Real ID. It's been around, so to speak, since 2003 in the wake of 9/11 as a much more effective way of proving who you are at airport security checkpoints. And it would be on your driver's license, a different designation that goes on that driver's license, put on that driver's license by your state's Division of Motor Vehicles. Well, it's never happened yet. It keeps getting kicked down the road, kicked down the road, kicked down the road. They're now saying it's going to be around. It's going to start kicking in for sure after, 22 years? This May. But guys, I'm telling you right now, no need to rush. Why? Because enforcement doesn't begin, assuming this happens at all, until 2027. That's 24 years after they introduced it. In the meantime, if you're holding a valid U.S. passport, you're never going to need it anyway. So just be aware of that. Okay, a lot of questions about the ETA and the ETIAS. What is that? Or what are they? Electronic travel authorizations, otherwise known as an electronic visa. For those of you who've been going to Australia the last couple of years, they've already had one. You apply for it online, you pay for it. They send you an email confirmation with essentially an electronic visa number, and that's what you present first to get on the plane to prove you have the visa, and then when you get to Australia. Well, now the UK has already done it. It kicked in about a month ago. It's called the ETA. It's going to cost you about $13, and you need to apply for it at least 72 hours before you're going to buy your ticket, right? Not before you fly, but before you buy your ticket. Then they'll send you, if you're approved, an electronic TA, an electronic travel authorization, and a number. Then use when you buy your ticket so that it's part of your passenger record. Then you can go to the airport, then you can fly to London. If you don't do that, you are not getting on the plane. Then what's an ETIAS? Well, that's the version of the European community, the other 27 countries of the EU, or 26 because of Brexit. UK is not part of that. That kicks in supposedly at the end of April. Now, that could get kicked down the road again. It was last year because of the Paris Olympics. They didn't want to mess with it. It's still listed for April of this year. We'll stay on top of that. Once again, you apply for it online. Again, 3 days in advance. That one will cost you about $10. Okay? Just so you know about that. Now let's get into the latest in terms of what's going on around the world in relation to a number of announcements by President Trump, whether it's the tariffs or immigration or any other activity that affects foreign countries, like the closing of all USAID offices. All of this has an effect, almost an immediate effect, on travel. Okay? The cost of travel or the ability to travel. For example, Canadians have announced in the response to Trump's announcement initially of a 25% tariff, they were going to boycott U.S. goods. That'll cost Americans $2.1 billion. estimates, right? That's from the USTA says that. On the closing of the USAID offices and cutting off their funding, that's a much more serious short and long-term impact economically. I'll give you an example. People don't know this because it's not part of our daily routine, but 1/4 of the population of Jordan right now are Syrian refugees. Jordan can't afford to take care of them, so USAID is doing that. Well, as of today, no, they're not. Funds have been cut off. Everybody who works there has been put on leave. This is not just in Jordan, it's everywhere around the world, right? So you're going to see governments on an economic level, depending on their current economic condition, they can become destabilized and fail. And then, of course, you have the Gaza situation with no country. You heard President Trump today say he wants to own Gaza, move the Palestinians out, and make it the Arab Riviera. Well, I'm not getting into politics here. I'm getting into practicality. Where are they going to go? Who's going to take them? Egypt already announced they won't. Israel certainly won't. Syria doesn't exist to that extent right now, having recovered from their own, caving in. Lebanon is in disarray. The Saudis won't do it. There goes all their neighbors, right? What's going to happen? Again, economic impact. So we will be monitoring these stories because ultimately it will affect fuel prices, your airline ticket. It'll affect air rights over countries who can fly over what? Meaning longer flights, more fuel burn, higher airfares. And from a foreign exchange point of view, you're going to see a lot of foreigners not wanting to come to the United States right now. And because of that, balance of trade, just on that alone, is going to fall apart. So we will certainly be following that and happy to answer any questions you might have about that. But the bottom line is the rest of the world right now is trying to figure out how they're going to save their own economies with that stuff that's been going on with the United States for a century just about in terms of foreign aid. So stick around for that too. All right, done that. Now, let's talk about a couple of other things happening. Number one, here's some good news. International travel for the rest of us is exploding. United Airlines is now the largest airline in the world. They've added 17 new destinations to their flight schedules already starting. This ranges from Mongolia to Taiwan to the Philippines to Dakar in Senegal to Greenland, maybe our 51st state. Delta's kicked in on their transatlantic service. They're doing nonstop flights to cities in Sicily, in Italy. These are secondary and tertiary cities. Americans flying Chicago to Madrid. They never did that before. So you're going to see an explosion on the flight schedules. And for domestic flights, that's another story. You're going to see cutbacks in those schedules because the airlines think they're going to be making more money on overseas flights. But for these introductory routes, if you act quickly, you'll get some nice introductory airfares. Try to book something after June 15th, you won't because the summer fares kick in. All right, now let's scroll down and say hello to some folks here. Sorry for being late and saying hi. Jim and Harriet, always number one on the screen. Hopes and prayers are with the people who lost their lives over the Potomac. Couldn't agree more. Greetings from Atlanta from Tim. Sue saying, hi from cold and snowy Bellingham, Washington. Well, believe it or not, it's snowing in Istanbul right now. I've been in Istanbul one other time in early January, about 8 years ago, when it was snowing. And it's sort of like what happens if it snows in Milan and like one snowflake hits the ground, they close the city, they close the airport. Well, we'll see what happens here. Right now, the snow's not sticking, but it's a very cold day in Istanbul. Okay, here we go. Okay, Michael's saying, I'm traveling from Detroit to Reykjavik and later Oslo and all parts of Norway. We're going to enjoy the northern lights. As far north as Tromsø. Okay, it's probably best to get individual flights and train tickets from the individual carriers. Well, if you're taking trains, it's the Eurail pass. But remember the caveat there. You've got to buy that Eurail pass in conjunction with your round trip US ticket before you take your first flight. And the most, look, as many trains you can throw onto that Eurail pass, do it. It's still the best deal ever. You know, when I first started using the Eurail pass, it applied to maybe 7 trains. It now train lines. Now it's more than 33. You have great options. And it's a more efficient way than spending $800 a night for a hotel room if you plan it properly, and you'll be in good shape. Okay. All right. Hello, Michael. Hello, Mark, who's saying hi from Flowery Branch, Georgia. Okay. And Jeff saying hello from Southern California. Do I have a hidden gem in Bali? I do. Write to me, Peter at petergreenberg.com, and I'll share it with you. Okay. Flowery Branch. That's what I just said, didn't I? Sorry, Mark. Hello. Oh, aloha, Raymond from the Jersey Shore and Birgit in Stuttgart on a glorious Wednesday in New York. Well, it's snowing here in Istanbul, Raymond, but I'll be back to New York a little bit later this week. Interesting point, Tim. Anybody else think it's interesting that an airport was named after a president that fired all the air traffic controllers? Yeah. Now that you mention it. All right. Kristen saying hi from Bellingham. And Jean is in Tulsa. Camilla, of course, in Tucson every week. Hello, Camilla. Tim Kelly says, any update on Southwest Iceland Air? No, but we'll have it for you hopefully next week. Southwest is still going through its growing pains with its new investor. Kaio saying, okay. I have been talking about this for a long time. Thank you for reminding me, and thank you for reminding everybody else. What I'm talking about the FAA is not a conversation I just came up with last Wednesday. I've been talking about this for 40 years plus. If anybody here watching me wants to have an interesting experience, check out the public website of the National Transportation Safety Board. Why? Because every year they actually publish something called their 10 most wanted list. What's on that list? All the safety recommendations they made to regulators that were ignored. The NTSB does great work. They're my heroes. They actually work under the most adverse conditions to find the probable cause, and then they go one step further and they find the solutions. And then regulatory agencies slow walk them. Why? Because of cost to the operators or the manufacturers. That's not our problem. The problem is if you find the defect either in procedures, materials, or basic maintenance, and if you don't fix it, you know people are going to die, you either fix it or you'll pay a much bigger cost, right? Is it any different? Now I'm putting my fireman hat on. Is it any different than states in this country consciously refusing to bury power lines? It's not that they couldn't bury them or that it was physically impossible to do the job. They've known about a problem of power lines causing fires since there were power lines and fires. How do you think the Maui fire started? Okay. You want to mitigate that problem? Bury the power lines, right? Because it's not just fire, it's wind, it's tornadoes in the Midwest, right? It's superstorms like Superstorm Sandy on the East Coast. Bury the power lines. Why don't they do it? Oh, they didn't want to spend the money. It was cost. Well, let me ask you a question. How much is it worth now? But we've been screaming about that for a long time. Here's another one. Source of water for the people who lost their homes and all their possessions and their lives in Southern California. If you're living in a coastal city, there's a solution here. You run about 2.5 miles of very wide diameter into the ocean. And at the end of that pipe, you put about a 40-foot diameter strainer, and then you put a V connection on the shore. Why a V connection? Because normally the water that you're going to pump out of the ocean will go through desalination, and you run a pipe, at least in California, all the way through California and into Nevada, New Mexico, and Arizona, where the water levels have dropped precipitously. Okay, what's the other V connection? In an emergency, that pipe also runs to the hydrants and to the sewer systems, and you have an endless supply of salt water to fight the fires, right? The hydrants are never going to go dry. You've got pumping systems. Now, I would like somebody, and by the way, I'm speaking as a fireman, and in New York on my department, when we have a fire and we're worried about water pressure, we do something called drafting. We take our fire hose with a big strainer at the end and we drop it into the bay. And that's what fuels an unlimited supply of water to fight the fire. Anybody here who's watching who thinks they've got a better idea? Let me hear it. But remember, this is just basic stuff. They should have been doing it for years with the power lines all across America. And in coastal cities, they can be great water suppliers for the rest of the states by just running that pipe. It's not a big deal. And for those CFO mentality people go, oh, it's too expensive. Yeah. Ask the state of California right now what the damage estimates are just in the Pacific Palisades fire, not to mention all the other fires in Altadena and other fires around. It's a no-brainer. All right. I went off track a little bit, but the same principle applies. Okay. Sandra's saying hi in Fort Lauderdale. Alexandra's saying, oh, yes, you're right. She's mentioning the Ciragan Palace where I am right now. A former working Ottoman palace right here on the Bosphorus. It's an amazing hotel, one of the great hotels of the world. We actually did a television show here called Hotels of the Past and featured the Ciragan Palace. It's spelled Ciragan, but pronounced Ciragan, and run by an amazing, legendary hotelier named Ralph Radke, a buddy of mine. But I'm here doing a project as well. So not at the hotel, but I'm staying here doing that project. In any case, I agree with you, Alessandra. It's an amazing property. Okay, here we go. Hello, Sue. Hello, Gina. Hi from San Diego, Gina. Okay. And Joy is saying, are there any must-sees while visiting Dubai, traveling with a group and only there for 6 nights with built-in itinerary? Well, if you have a built-in itinerary, why are you asking me? Here's the problem with group travel. Ready? I'm going to give you 4 words. Get off the bus. Simple as that. Now, if you have a day and a half free or 2 days free, get yourself a car and a driver and 3 other friends with you so you can split the cost and drive through all the Emirates and all the way down through Oman into the Musandam Peninsula. Unbelievable experience. You'll be swimming with dolphins in the middle of the Arabian Gulf. Check it out. All right. But for most people who visit Dubai for the first time, their idea of a great experience is going to the Burj Khalifa. I still think they're the tallest building in the world, although somebody might disagree with me. Or they'll go out in an old Toyota Land Cruiser and go dune bashing. But there's so many other things to do. But bottom line is, for me, it's get in the car and go through some of the other Emirates, Fujairah, Sharjah, Ras Al Khaimah, and then keep going, and you're going to get to Oman. Oh, wait, of course, I mentioned Abu Dhabi. They've got the Louvre. Well, a Louvre, and worthwhile seeing that as well. All right, let's keep going here. A couple of housekeeping notes for those of you who I saw last week in Chicago at the Travel and Adventure Show. Great to see you and able to answer your questions. My tour continues, not this weekend, but next weekend on Saturday. I'll be speaking at Phoenix, and then following that in LA on the 22nd of February, followed by Denver on March 8th, the Bay Area, that's Santa Clara, on March 15th, and finally wrapping up 2 days in Washington, D.C. on March 29th and 30th. I hope you get a chance to come out. I'll be making a speech, of course, but answering a lot of questions. And a lot of other folks will be with me as well. Rick Steves, you know him on PBS. Josh Gates, my buddy, from all his series on the Discovery Channel. So if you get a chance, come out and see us. All right. That's the first title. Now, second little housekeeping note. Coming out next week, our new series is part of our hidden series. It's on PBS, of course, and then streams on Amazon and Apple TV Plus. It's when I say it's part of our hidden series, let me give you the concept of the show. No tour bus, no gift shop, no brochure, no guidebook, no TripAdvisor stickers. Don't get me started on TripAdvisor. I take you to the most extraordinary, amazing experiences in a destination that few people know about, but that are totally accessible to you. Here's the trailer.
Coming soon on PBS, Hidden Uganda and a trek into the impenetrable forest and a vulnerable population.
They're in there.
They're in there. You can actually see the silverback lying down, taking a nap, and one of the youngest babies laying in front of him.
All of these efforts to view the gorillas safely and sustainably have allowed the population to thrive.
The numbers are going up. In fact, because they're going up, they're no longer critically endangered.
So these guys are not out of the woods yet, but they're better.
They're better. We're so excited. It's almost doubled over the past 25 years. When I first started working with them, there were only about 600 in Bwindi, and now there's over 1,063. I'll say that tourism saved Bwindi Forest.
It really did.
Yeah.
Just part of what you'll see on Hidden Uganda.
So check your local listings, and about right after it premieres on PBS, you'll be able to see it on Amazon and Apple TV. And you can see all of our hidden shows right now that are chronicled on Amazon and Apple TV, including our weekly investigative news magazine called The Travel Detective. So check those out. We appreciate that. A few more things. I've got some other questions that you guys sent in, so let's get to that. Sam says, how early can I renew my passport if it expires in 2026? Well, I'll give you the technical answer. You can do it now. But the question I have to ask you is, are you willing to give it up for about 8 weeks? Because that's how long it may take to process. But if you wait till do it in May or June or July, it could take 12 to 16 weeks because that's when everybody else is doing it. But if you have no plans to travel for the next 8 weeks, go ahead and renew it now. It's good for 10 years, right? And get the 52-pager, not the 28-pager, because once you run out of pages with stamps, in the old days, any U.S. consulate or passport agency could actually glue in additional pages. Not anymore. Even if you have 6 more years left on the passport, but you've exhausted the pages, you got to get a new passport. Speaking of passport stamps, more and more countries are getting rid of them. And for someone who's a sentimentalist like me, that's a sad day. I like the artwork. I like the registration of where I've been. So you're going to see them by the end of this month. You probably won't see them in any more European Union countries. It's all biometric and e-gates. They're already the same thing in England right now. It's e-gates in Gatwick, no stamps on the passport, no forms to fill out. That will start to be the name of the game worldwide. Now, remember, there are 54 countries in Africa. My understanding is there are no e-gates. You'll still get the stamps. But more and more European countries, see you later. The UK, of course, already has said see you later on stamps. And we're going to see that happening in parts of Asia as well. So that's the passport story. All right. Marie says, my husband and I are looking forward to spend a week in France and need some help looking for small off the beaten path towns or cities in the south of France. Marie, you forgot to tell me something. When are you going? Okay. What do you like to do when you travel? And don't say relax. Get back to me and I'll try to help you out. Okay. Janet says, I'm traveling to China soon and I would like to purchase an insurance to cover potential medical costs. Any recommendations? Well, yes, I have a couple. But first of all, we got to get to a definition of what kind of insurance you want to buy. I'm assuming you want to buy medical evacuation and repatriation insurance. And there are three good companies that I know of that write those policies. One is called MedJet Assist, one is called Travel Guard, and one is called Allianz. But you need to read the policy language carefully. And that means get somebody to read it for you who understands the hieroglyphics, because every policy changes in terms of your benefits. A very well-written, comprehensive medical evacuation and repatriation policy will do the following. If you get sick or injured anywhere overseas, they'll pay to get you medically stabilized at your location. They will then consult your personal physician. After all, who knows your medical history better than your own doctor? And then depending on that condition and the severity of it, will fly a medically equipped jet. Here's language again, to fly you to the medical facility and doctor of your choice. Not every policy reads that way, which is why you need to read that policy. That's the killer, okay? By the way, they sell it as an annual policy. You can buy it per trip, but why would you? And you need to read the fine print to find out what the exclusions are. There may be age exclusions, pre-existing medical condition exclusions, and destination exclusions. Probably not going to vacation in Gaza right now and get covered. You get the picture. Okay. Okay. Let me go to Kathy here. My family's trying to take a trip to Europe soon. And the last time we went with Trafalgar Tours. It wasn't bad by any means, but we prefer a smaller group, or even better, a private tour. Okay, if you want a private tour, are you prepared to pay for it? If you are, then here's what I want you to do. Go a great consortium of travel advisors called Virtuoso. You could also do Signature or Travel Leaders. Those are three great consortia. They have agents and advisors who specialize in either specific destinations or specific affinities or experiences. And they'll put you with a travel agent who does nothing but private tours of Europe, and then get out your wallet. It's as simple as that. But they do a great job, by the way. All right, let's keep going here. Sheila wants to know, we'll be traveling to Tokyo from LAX. We will be flying into LAX from Las Vegas. How many hours of lead time do we need to get between picking up our bags at a domestic and then getting ourselves over to the international terminal for the flight to Tokyo? I'm not a seasoned traveler. Any insight? Okay, what you haven't told me is, which airline are you flying from Las Vegas to LAX? Because it may interline with the carrier you're flying to Tokyo on. Are you flying to Tokyo on United or Delta? There's a good chance you'll be leaving from the domestic terminal and not Tom Bradley, right? So come back to me with that information, and I'll be glad to help you out. Because if you're flying on an airline that interlines with that airline, then all you're doing is you're landing in LA and maybe walking between terminals, and piece of cake, your bags will just interline away. They'll be checked all the way through. However, if you're flying to LAX, let's say on Southwest, which doesn't have interline agreements with the major carriers, then you will have to go to Terminal 1, pick up your bags from Southwest, and then schlep over to whatever terminal your carrier is flying from. So let me have that information, and I'll help you out. Tim says, I was reading that there were a lot of near misses at Reagan. Why was this the case? Well, first of all, isn't it a bizarre clarification or classification that they call them near misses when they are really near hits, right? So there have been a lot of near hits, both in the air and lately on the ground, because of congestion, right? Congestion on the tarmac. If airlines are scheduling so many planes to land at a certain hour, and there are planes that haven't pushed back from the gate, where are they going to go? I mean, it's almost every week now we hear a story of one plane clipping the wings of another while taxiing, right? Now, as far as near misses, I'm going to try to be fair about this. The clarification of a near miss most often is planes are equipped, modern jet aircraft are equipped with something called a TCAS. That stands for Collision Avoidance System. It's an interactive system that talks to each plane from the other plane. So if the system on this plane determines that they're on a collision course with this plane, it will alert the TCAS in that cockpit. This TCAS is already alerted, and they'll immediately give the pilots a loud alarm and an audio command: dive right, climb right. Now, Was that a near miss? Not really, but it might be reported as such. Anytime you're identifying traffic and the separation isn't acceptable, you get out of the way. Is that a near miss? It's interesting how they define it, because in some cases, planes that suddenly fly within 1,000 feet of each other, that's considered a near miss. Now, if they're flying towards each other, the closing speed is pretty rapid. In any case, hopefully this new ban on low-flying helicopters anywhere near the TCA at Reagan will contribute a lot to the lowering of the official near miss, okay? Matthew said, oh, has there been an official decision on ETIAS? I already answered that, Matthew. Look for April 25th for that. If that changes, and it could, we'll let you know. Okay, Laura says, I heard that airfares are expected to go up by 20%. Is this true, and why at this time of year? Well, normally it wouldn't be going up that much at this time of the year, but we're dealing with airline consolidation, right? Alaska and Hawaiian, and the possibility of a merger with Spirit, once again with Frontier. Anytime that happens, airfares don't go down, they go up. The other reason why airfares are going up is because seasonality is gone. Every plane is full. So when you're dealing with those laws of supply and demand, it just stands to reason, when the demand is higher, the fares are higher. I wish it wasn't the case, but that's the world in which we are living. Okay, let's see here. I'm looking. Oh, Gina says, can we join you on your hidden travel adventures? It'd be great to be on the filming of these trips. You know what? Here's what I'll think about doing. I did this once or twice to benefit charities. I will figure out, there's a charity we serve on the board of it. And by the way, if Anthony has that graphic, let's put it up. It's Operation USA. They're part of a group of great charities doing all of that relief work in Los Angeles in the wake of the fires. But I will think about, and if Anthony, you can find that, put it up. If not, we'll do it next week. But let me think about a charity that we can raise money for. And if we can make that work, we'll auction it off. We'll auction it off 2 spots on one of our shoots, either as a royal tour or a hidden. And all the money that you bid will, there it is, Operation USA. That's the group I'm on the board of, have been for many years. By the way, Operation USA was founded by Julie Andrews, and they've done amazing work for decades, like clearing out landmines in Cambodia and Vietnam. So many of those kids losing legs. And of course, then Operation USA is also helping to provide the prosthetics in natural disasters, like the one they're going through now in Los Angeles. They're on the front lines of supplies, whether there's an earthquake, a tsunami, a tornado. Operation USA is on the ground. The LAFD Foundation, I'm a fireman, as you know, we support them as well. Direct Relief, and of course, as always, the American Red Cross. The losses in those fires in LA, they're still hard for me to comprehend and impossible to calculate. But one thing I do know, and you know too, there are a lot of people out there who need your help. So please donate generously. And I can tell you for a fact that these 4 organizations, 98% of the money raised gets to the people who need it. It's not like some other charities where they're taking off 50% for administrative costs. That's garbage. This is all the money that comes in, less maybe 2% to run the office. It goes out. We're all volunteer. None of us get paid. All right, so do the best you can. And this is going to be an ongoing donation opportunity, simply because it's going to be generations, at least 2, before that community gets back on track. I should say those communities. All right, so the answer to your question, Gina, is let me do some homework here. And I promise within the month, I'll come back and we'll do an auction, but we'll do a bid. But we're going to start the bid high. I'm just telling you, right? I want to raise as much money as we can for Operation USA. All right. Diane says, do we know who let the second supervisor go home early from an understaffed air traffic control tower? Yeah, we do, because it was standard operating procedure that after 9:30 at night, they reduced the number to one controller because presumably the traffic was lower and they didn't have the staff or the budget. This is not a new phenomenon. It wasn't like, oh yeah, go home. No, that's what they've been doing, right? Just like they've been doing mandatory overtime in the ATC. So we got to address this, right? So it wasn't somebody falling down on the job or being ignorant. It was the FAA as a matter of budget, not serving the public. Okay. Camilla says insurance. If you need minimum $100,000 medical expense, follow every policy rule to get the pre-existing exclusion waiver. This is crucial. Read the small print. I couldn't agree more. You want a policy that offers primary coverage, not secondary. Boy, ain't that the case. Same thing, by the way, if you use a credit card to rent a rental car. You'll hear from the credit card companies, not all of them, but many of them, that if you rent the car with your credit card, you get car insurance. Well, they're technically correct, but they're misleading. You don't get primary coverage. You get secondary coverage, and that only kicks in when you exhaust the primary coverage. And if you don't have the primary coverage, there is no coverage. So, Camilla, you're right on the money there. Okay. Oh, repeat the paperwork we'll need to get for travel from the USA to Europe again. Very simple. It's called the ETIAS. Call the airline operating to Europe from the US. They can tell you about it. Or, what a concept, any travel agent, you just got to apply online. They can walk you through that. It'll cost you about $10 to get the ETIAS. You need to do that about 72 hours prior to your trip. And then you'll have that number to go along with your ticket that will allow you to get on the plane and clear into that country. I hope that was helpful. All right, one more little housekeeping note, and that's the photo of the week. And there it is. Cool photo of the week, right? You know where it is? You know who took it? Juan Distal. And Juan writes, this photo was taken on the coast of Italy with a Pixel 6 phone. Yep, talk about waiting for the light and clarity. Thank you, Juan. And by the way, if you think your photo qualifies as the photo of the week, you know what to do. You want to have it up there next to Juan's? Email me to photocontest@petergreenberg.com. And if we like it, it gets up on the screen, and we really appreciate that, Juan, for doing that. Last housekeeping note, of course, I'll see you on the radio this Saturday. And the show is coming from the Omni in Atlanta, Centennial Park. For those of you who know Atlanta, the Omni was, I know the Omni so well because it was attached literally at the hip to the old CNN Center. But lots of stuff to report on what they're doing at the Omni and what they're doing in Centennial Park, not to mention all of Atlanta. So join us this Saturday starting at about 10:05 Eastern. Check your local listings. Or, of course, you can always listen to us. We stream it live on our website with the imaginative name, petergreenberg.com. I'm going to go out now and enjoy the snow in Istanbul. No, I won't, but I'll watch it. And I'll see you in a couple of days on the radio. And I'll see you next week for our next global travel update. Anthony Protos-Chung, thank you again for doing the boards back in Los Angeles. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great, safe week. And remember, common sense. Bury the power lines. Let's get desalination pipes into the ocean. And be safe. See you next week.
Peter Greenberg's live global travel update is presented to you by Colette. Discover the world. Guided travel since 1918.